Dr. Jiang Yang.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the third reading of the Gambling Amendment Bill. I would like to acknowledge Tawaroa Falebo for proposing or putting forward this bill, and also acknowledge Honourable Chris Truman, Minister for National Affairs, and also Jonathan Young, Chair of the Select Committee, Commerce Select Committee, for doing an excellent job in overseeing the public submissions process and changes to the original bill. Mr. Speaker, annual expenditure on poker machines is falling from $912 million in 2008 to $840 million last year. The number of machines is also falling from 25,000 in 2003 to around 17,500 now. But still, much needs to be done. This is particularly important to the Asian communities because they are more vulnerable to gambling harm. The bill's purpose is to provide additional measures to prevent and minimize the harm caused by gambling, to ensure that money from gambling benefits the community, and to enable community involvement in decisions about the provision of gambling. Mr. Speaker, National takes problem gambling seriously, and we fully recognize that this can bring harm to some people and communities. Changes made to the bill by the Commerce Select Committee, of which I'm a member, will help combat this. Now, for example, the original bill only said that harm minimization devices may be introduced through society's license conditions. The Select Committee recommended a regulation-making power instead. Regulations enable us to introduce new technologies on a mandatory basis nationwide rather than through each individual license. Regulations are also more flexible as new technology develops. And many community groups, organizations, and sports clubs rely on gaming funding to provide important services to their community. This bill will ensure that a minimum percentage of gambling proceeds will go to community groups in the area where they were raised, while maintaining some flexibility. Mr. Speaker, some communities are disproportionately affected by problem gambling. For example, lower-income communities and Maori and Pacifica populations. This bill will give more flexibility to councils to allow venues to move out of low socio-economic neighborhoods and into areas like CBD, where it is supported by the local council. And also, the original bill would have required 80% of gaming proceeds to be distributed in the local area where they were raised. The Select Committee recommended the introduction of a regulation-making power instead, and we can achieve the same outcomes through regulation, which is more flexible and will enable us to consider issues such as national or regional groups who receive funding from gaming societies. And the original bill recommended that the councils, rather than gaming societies, should distribute funding. There was no support for this at the Select Committee, and we support a continued role of gaming societies. The original bill expressed a concern about the roles and conflicts of interest in gaming societies. We are addressing these issues through a wider package of reforms which will be introduced later this year, and I will elaborate on this later on. Mr. Speaker, these improvements to the bill will enable a smoother way to introduce harm minimization devices and a more flexible model of for ensuring that gaming proceeds go back to the communities where they were raised. Earlier this year, the government announced a $55.3 million three-year strategy for problem gambling, which focuses on giving people the assistance they need. This includes $25.3 million for frontline intervention services to help people with gambling problems and others affected by these problems. $20.5 million for public health services, particularly prevention activities encouraging safe gambling practices and raising awareness of the potential dangers of gambling, and $6.6 million for research and evaluation. Our full package of changes is much broader in scope than this bill and includes a number of other measures, such as increasing the level of funding that goes back to the community. Along with $55.3 million three-year strategy for problem gambling I talked about, we will be introducing reforms later this year which include more funding for the community, lower compliance costs, and increased transparency and compliance. Now, more specifically, these reforms will increase the minimum amount gaming societies are required to return to the community. Every additional 1% means $8.5 million more for community and sporting groups. And also, the reforms will simplify the way societies pay bars and pubs to host gaming machines and issue longer licenses as an incentive for compliant societies and venues, and enable grant information to be published online rather than in a newsletter. Also, the reforms will enable the auditing of management companies, strengthen the ability to address conflicts of interest, improve the transparency of grant decisions, clarify the law to enable DIA to suspend or cancel a license in response to non-compliance. So, Mr. Speaker, the national-led government takes problem gambling seriously, and we believe that we are moving in the right direction. Thank you.
I understand the next call is a split call. Sue or William CO.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.